Portal vein occlusion when my daughter took sick. Hello, you all. I'm Diana Brienne. Well, as you know, I've been sharing some stories from my life, some very, personal stories actually, and in hopes that maybe some of what I share can be a guide or help other people. Everyone's situations are different, everyone's life is different, and those two situations play out exactly the same in most cases. And when I share a story, it may or may not be similar to someone else's, and it may or may not have the same outcome or the same ways of dealing with it. So I share all kinds of things on my page. I talk about being 62, I talk about being over 60, I talk about fitness, talk about makeup, I talk about wigs, I talk about hair, I talk about life, I talk about fun, and I talk about serious topics too. And it's kind of a well-rounded channel that I'm starting up here, Diana Brienne Fairchild, so make sure to subscribe, please. Well, about 2 years ago, my daughter had always been the perfect picture of health, and she had been a homecoming queen and just an amazing all-around person, never sick. And then I began to notice some personality changes in her, and I couldn't figure it out. I knew she wasn't taking drugs or drinking or smoking or anything like that, and I just could not figure it out. And then she began to develop flu-like symptoms. And so I took her to the doctors, and they said she has the flu, send her back to school, she's good. And I said, no, it doesn't feel like the flu. So then I took her to another doctor, and they said the same thing. And then a third doctor, and he said the same thing, but he said, let me do some blood work on her. And, I just was so uncomfortable when he sent her home. And I just knew that there was something wrong, a mom's instinct. And so I told her the next morning, I said, look, I'm taking you to the emergency room. I always look at the emergency room as a one-stop and shop. They find out what's really going on rather than having to wait weeks or months to find out by going to doctor. And she said, no, she said, they're just going to tell me I have the flu. I want to go see a friend of mine and go swimming. I said, no, I said, that's not right. There's something wrong with you. I don't know what it is. And she was out of breath. She, just all kinds of things. And so long story short, I said, I'm going for a run. And when I come back, I want you to be ready to go to the doctor. She said, no, I'm going to my friend's house. And so I stepped outside the door, didn't get very far, and the doctor called me on my cell phone. He said, get her right to the hospital. Her hemoglobin was 2.2, hemoglobin and hematocrit, which is non-existent. I mean, you can't really hardly exist, and especially not be functional and walking around. But I guess it had happened over a gradual period of time, and that's why she was up walking around the way she was. So I grabbed her and put her in the truck. I drive a pickup truck, and I took her right to the emergency room, got her in there. They took her right in. They started blood transfusions, not knowing what the cause was. They originally said, well, it's probably menstruation, from a period. And I said, no, that doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound right. Long story short, they got her blood up to like a 4.2, and they decided to transfer her out to a university hospital 2 hours away in the middle of the night by ambulance. And so there I was following her, not ever knowing, because we were still kind of new to the state, and I had not been there before. And we were driving in the middle, I was following the ambulance. I got lost, but I actually beat the ambulance there. And I ended up in her room. They already had a room waiting for her. And I got there in the middle of the night, exhausted. Remember, I'm 62 years old. I'm lugging luggage and through tunnels at the hospital. It's a big, huge maze. I got lost in the middle of the night up there at the hospital, got into the wrong building, had to go find parking, all of that. And So, but because I'm in great physical shape, I work out every day, I was able to endure this whole thing. And that's why there's a lot of value in taking care of who you are so you can take care of those you love. They couldn't figure what was wrong. So finally I said, I started researching on my laptop sitting there. I mean, I'm sitting in a blue chair, sleeping there, the miserable chair. It was a horrible chair with a bar in the middle. So it was really difficult to sleep, and people walking in the room in the middle of the night. And they continued to give her blood transfusions. She felt really good. And I found something called broken varices in the esophagus, but I didn't know what the cause was, but I told the doctors, and they said, yeah, that's what we were thinking. So I don't know who discovered it first, but that's what I figured it was. Well, lo and behold, they finally had a doctor come in and say the cause of it was portal vein occlusion. She had developed a portal vein clot in her, the artery that goes from, I think, the intestines or the spleen into the portal. It was a portal vein, and it got blocked. And they said, well, we're going to send you home. And I said, no, let's resolve this here. I don't want to go through that. And so they ended up sending us home, even though I practically kicked, yelled, and screamed, not for them to send us home. I wanted it solved. My daughter felt great, went back to school. We were supposed to go through all these doctors, and then she threw up blood. I called her main doctor. He said, just call 911. We called 911. We had her transported back to the hospital, had to wait 3 days in the ER because they didn't have a bed at the University Hospital. Finally, they put her on a cardiac floor here at our hospital, which is a very, very good hospital, but not equipped to handle her situation. And in the middle of the night, once again, they sent us up to the University Hospital, and I was exhausted, but I was there with her every moment and every step of the way. And she was 18 at the time. Now she's 21 and doing great. And but it was very touch and go, very touch and go. And had I not been the persistent mom that I was, only God knows what would have happened. And lo and behold, she ended up having to have portal vein surgery where they did a shunt inside. And I mean, it was a huge, huge surgery. She was on the liver floor, had a world-renowned liver surgeon. And it wasn't a liver transplant, but it was involving the liver and everything. And she was such a trooper and so amazing and so wonderful. And, it was a huge, huge operation. Great hospital, great doctors. I was wiped out and exhausted from, by then it seemed like weeks of being in, it turned into a couple weeks of being in that room and sitting in the blue chair and sleeping in the blue chair and being exhausted and waking up in my pajamas with the doctors all coming in. But they sent her home. And it was, a slow process of healing, back to the ER, like we thought the incision came open, things like that. But now almost, 2 years later, she is doing wonderful. She goes to school, college, and she works, and she has friends, and she's living a full life. And, but it was a very scary time. And I had never even heard of a portal vein occlusion. I had no idea what it was, and I still don't fully understand it. But it was kind of a birth defect type of thing that she had grown up with. No doctor had ever caught it. We never had any symptoms, had no idea. Somehow she had developed little blood vessels around it that were circulating all the blood. But at some point, the blood began to back up into the spleen and her belly began to swell. So that was kind of all of that going together at the time that we put this all together and figured out what it was. And, it was a tough call. It was a tough journey. It was very, very, very scary, to say the least. And I'm so glad that I am the persistent mother that I am. I don't, if I think something's wrong, I trust my intuition almost no matter who tells me what. And I'm so glad I did. 3 doctors kept telling her that she had the flu. And I kept saying, I don't think this is the flu. And so thank the Lord that she is well, doing wonderful, and just praise God, praise God. And I pray that she stays healthy always. And I don't know if this story helps anyone. It's not meant to be any kind of guidance or decision making or really informative. It's not meant to be informative. It's just meant to share my story with what happened. And as you all know, I'm sharing little bits and pieces of my life with you all in hopes that I can inspire, motivate, or, I guess I don't want to say be informative because that's not really what I'm trying to do, but just be helpful to people. And so anyhow, I hope to talk with you all soon. Make sure to subscribe to my page, and I'll talk to you then. From my house to yours, God bless you, and I'll talk to you then.